Halachas of Hilchos Teshuva. In Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, we see boys who year after year come to learn, and after a year or two, they are changed individuals without them having done all the steps in the Rambam Hilchos Teshuva. They probably never even learned the Rambam Hilchos Teshuva. Nor did they learn the Shari Teshuva of Rabbeinu Yaina, whose first two Sha'arim detail how to do Teshuva, why one should do Teshuva, and after a year or two or three, they become serious B'nai Torah. Many of them go on to other yeshivas where they are the best. They're at the top. How does that work? Person opens a Gemara, he learns how to read. Before that, he didn't know how to read. Learns Chumash, he learns Gemara. And 2, 3, 4 years down, without having learned any of the Hilchos Teshuva, he becomes not only a fully functioning member of Torah society, but a serious Ben Torah Talmud Chacham as well. Somebody was just telling me about one of the alumni of Ohr Somayach who's the best Talmud in Rabbi Arieli Shir. And he knew nothing when he started. How does that work? That's one question. The other question, 100 years ago, there was one Baal Tshuva, one. In the whole of the Jewish world, his name was Nosson Birnbaum. He was originally one of the founders and the leaders of the Zionist movement, and he became a Baal Tshuva, and the whole to-do. And today, 100 years later, when arguably society is not as observant as it was then, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of Nosson Birnbaums. In those days, if your name was Nosson Birnbaum, they had articles about you, books about you. Today, nobody heard of you. Where did that change come about, and why did it come about? Now, Rabbi Schiller, he should be healthy, Shlita. 50 years ago, he founded Ohr Somayach. And at the time, more or less, it was the first yeshiva for baalei Teshuva. Maybe a few years before, he was busy with this. He invented the wheel. Nobody heard of it. Nobody heard of Teshuva until Rabbi Schiller and L'havdil ben Chaim L'chaim, Rabbi Weinbach and others came along. Where were they? What happened now? And now, if you have a religious community without a framework for baalei Teshuva, it's like in the olden days where you had a religious community that didn't have a day school, you didn't count, you weren't on the map. And today, without a baalei Teshuva yeshiva, without some framework for that, doesn't count. What changed? I want to share with you what I think may be the answer, and for us it is a very empowering understanding of life as we have it today. The Gemara in Yuma, Daf Pei Vav Amud Beis, makes a fascinating statement. The Gemara says two things, that if a person does Teshuva Meira, he does Teshuva out of fear or reverence for Hashem, it's doinos nasa loy kishgogos. The Averis that he did b'mezid, Hashem considers them as if he did them b'shoigeg, as if he did them inadvertently, not really meaning it. And then the Gemara says something further, which is that a person who does tshuva me'ava, if he does tshuva because he loves Hashem, zdoinais, the averis that he did b'mezid are nasis loy kazochias. They become like merits, like mitzvahs. Now that is wild. A person could do whatever he wants, do every aveira in the book, and then do tshuva, and all of his averis become mitzvahs. Does that make sense? That's question number one. Now, I can understand, we'll figure out tshuva, how that works in a second, but how does an aveira become a mitzvah? And the second question that should give us pause is the expression of the Gemara's donos, averis that you did brazenly, on purpose, nasis lo kizachios. They become like zuchuyos, like merits. Say, your aveira becomes like a mitzvah. What is nasis lo kizachios? Truth of the matter is that the whole idea of tshuva seems to be counterintuitive. You spill coffee on your friend's shirt. You drop his expensive phone. And now it is irretrievably broken, cannot be fixed. And you feel really badly and you say, I'm sorry. The phone doesn't fix itself. And his silk shirt is never going to be new again. You say, I really feel badly. Nothing has changed. I won't do it again. Still nothing has changed. I say, vidui. I'm so sorry. I announce my aveira to him and to everybody else, and that phone is done. The shirt is finished. Why does tshuva work? You did an aveira, you hurt someone, you broke something. It's done. You can have all of the components of tshuva. Charata, you feel badly. Aveira was still done. Vidui, Kabbalah ala asid, I promise not to do it again. Azivas achet, I won't do it again. I stopped doing it. The Aveira is still there. How does that work? And the Mesilas Yesharim, as is well known, asked this question. And he says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that akiras haratzayin, a person uprooting his will, is like akiras hamaisa. It's like he undid an action. What does that mean? If you break something, so it's not the fact that the glass left your hand, or you poured onto someone's shirt, or you said something nasty. It's not the words that on their own, in and of themselves, are the aveira. It's the intent. I wanted to do this. I didn't care. And a person, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's gift to mankind, because he understood, as we say in Rosh Hashanah, Ki Ata Yodea Yitzram, God knows the way we tick, how we tick. Ki Hein Basav Adam, a person is always faced with challenges. So he gives us the ability to be Oiker Aratz. In other words, a person who does tshuva is basically saying, I am not there anymore. I want to do that. I don't want to do it. And what I did is now against what I stand for and what I mean and what my life represents. It's akiras haratzon. I don't want that anymore. And this is a chiddush. And Hashem says, Akiras haratzon, removing, uprooting your will is like Akiras hamaisa, is like undoing the action. And this, by the way, is the understanding of Kol Nidre at the beginning of Yom Kippur. Seems to be a little incongruous. We're stepping forth into the most holy day of the year, the most momentous day of the year, and everybody knows Kol Nidre. You go to Kol Nidre. What's Kol Nidre? Look at the words. If I made a neder, I'm really sorry, and I'll try not to do it again. Talking about vows and oaths, and somehow figuring out how we can straighten those out for the future. What does that have to do with Yom Kippur? And the understanding is that this is the deal. Because what is tshuva? Tshuva is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's way of saying, if you get rid of the motivation, get rid of the will that made you do this Aveira, I am willing to take the action. God says the action is not what counts. It's your motivation, it's your will, it's your decision to do it. And if you can get rid of that, I am willing to undo and to look away from the action. And that is how Hataras Nadarim works. A person makes a neder, a person makes a vow. I'm not allowed to do this, or I can't have pleasure from that. And then he realizes that he messed up. And it's not a smart thing to go do. And he goes to the Chacham, and he says to the wise man, I made a mistake. Had I known what I know now, I would not have done this. And the Chacham, as the Gemara says in the Dharam, is Oker es haneder meikara. He undoes the vow from ab initio. Status quo ante, you're now before. In other words, the idea of Hataras Nadarim, going to a wise man who is able to understand where you're up to, and explaining to him that had you known then what you know now, you would have not have made that neder, you are able to, the Torah says, undo that neder. It's no longer binding. And the same idea is tshuva. Hashem says to us, if you are able to really and truly rid yourself of the motivation and the will to do that sin, I am putting you before the sin. And I am looking away from the action of the sin, and I'm looking at where you are now, and it's as if you didn't do it. Now that I understand, that we can live with. So we can understand that a person who does tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing to say it's as if you didn't do it. Good. That's fine. We can live with that. But how could it be that a person who does tshuva me'ava, it's zdonos, the averis that he did b'mezid, are nasalo kazachias, they now become merits. They're good for him. Mitzvahs. How do you get that? And I think we can understand it with a mashal. I used to give this mashal 40 years ago, but it's a lot easier now, and you'll understand why in a second. There's a guy lying in bed, and he's not doing anything. So 40 years ago, you didn't understand why somebody should lie in bed and not do anything. Today, I think you can imagine, if you really work your brain hard, what you should, I mean, you need one arm really, but besides that, maybe the other couple fingers, you can lie in bed, do nothing. Anyway, this fella's lying in bed, and his mother's a nice lady, and she brings him food. Takes the food, unwraps it, and there's a window next to his bed, throws the wrapper out the window, and this is how he spends his life. A year goes by, 5 years go by, 10 years go by. And the gentleman is, let's say, rather full. And his mother gets him an appointment by a cardiologist. And the cardiologist says, listen, man, you're not going to do something about it. You're done. You're toast. You're not going anywhere. You're going to stay there and the Chevra Kadisha will come. So he says, so what should I do? Now don't forget, this man for the last 25 years has been throwing wrappers and food that he didn't eat outside his window. And there's this huge mountain outside his window. Now he can't move, he's so, muscle bound or bound. And the doctor visits him. And the doctor says to him, listen, my dear friend, you want to live? You better start exercise. He said, I can't even get to the gym. What exercise? So you see the window? Get up that mountain. The guy takes himself out of his bed, climbs over the window, and he starts to climb. And every day, he climbs a little more. But that mountain of garbage, of trash, of detritus, is his Yeshua. Because that's his mountain, how he is able to, do his cardio or whatever you call it, and climb. And every time he climbs over the garbage that he left there for the last 25 years, his muscles start to work again. His heart starts to beat. His blood pressure goes down. And every time he climbs, the mountain sinks a little bit, and he's able to lean over and pick up a piece. And that's his exercise. And slowly, slowly, he gets back to cardiac health. That is the mashal of Zdonos Nasalo Kazachios. When a person is faced with averos that he did on purpose, it's very hard. It's very, very hard to overcome the things that you did. You enjoyed it, you wallowed in it, and a person who's doing tshuva me'ava is taking those averos and using them as his mountain over which to climb to get his tshuva. So the averos, every avera that he did, now becomes a medium for his tshuva, for his exercise. By climbing over it, he is becoming healthy. The averos, the effort involved in setting aside and putting away a lifetime of behavior is what is giving him the strength to continue. And therefore Hashem looks at every one of those averos, because every single one of those averos now becomes like the garbage outside this guy's window, something to climb over and to become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now we know in exercise as well, if a person takes 20 grams and his doctor asks him, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm pressing weights every day. How much? 20 grams. Whole day. How much exercise are you going to get? Not very much. In the days when I was still interested in exercise, they used to say, no pain, no gain. Do they still say it? Right? And that's the way it is with tshuva. If a guy is bench pressing half a pound every day, not going very far. He's not going to get into shape. But if he's bench pressing 300 pounds, it's a different story. And not only if he's bench pressing 300 pounds, but if he goes on one of these machines that every single muscle in his body is sweating and straining, that guy's going to get into shape. And that is getting back to our original question. Teshuva me'ava, when a bacher grows up not religious, or takes a detour. Every tshuva is tshuva me'ava. If you don't know about Torah, there's no such thing as tshuva me'ira. I'm not scared. I never heard of Torah. I never heard of Shema Yisrael. I never heard of the others. What's tshuva me'ira? There is no tshuva me'ira. But a person who at the age of 15, 16, 20, 30, 50 turns around and says, you know, I want to become a serious Jew. I'm going to leave that, whatever I have behind. That's tshuva me'ava. There is no me'ira. You're not afraid of anything. You don't know anything to be afraid of. You're not afraid of God. You barely know that He exists. You haven't been introduced. And you don't know anything, any of the mitzvahs. You don't know anything. Where is the tshuva me'ira? Never. It's all tshuva me'ava. And a bacher who grows up in a non-religious home or in a religious home and takes, as we said, a detour, everything he does is straining every muscle in his body. And that tshuva is what counts. And that tshuva is what will propel him to heights that 100 years ago didn't exist. Because 100, 150 years ago, when somebody went off, he was this much, this distance from going back. It was easy. He knew everything. It was all okay. He respected Torah, just not for me. And if he did so, if he went back, he wasn't about tshuva because he didn't undo his life that he had before. And the distance between non-observance and observance was infinitesimal. Today, and it's not a great commentary on the generation we live in, but it's a great commentary on the people like Rabbi Schiller and others who understood this. The distance is so far. And therefore, when a person decides to do tshuva, it is tshuva me'ava. It's not me'ira. You don't even know to be afraid. And therefore, everything that you take on is straining your muscles. Every lifestyle change means that every single one of your muscles is working. And you get into shape a lot faster, and zdainos nasaloi kezachyos, because your past experiences are now the fulcrum for your future successes. And therefore you can have a bacher, a year or two or three, and he becomes a serious ben Torah, whether he learns here, whether he learns elsewhere. He's at the top. Because the distance was so far, and the effort was so intense. And it is like this by every mitzvah. Medrash says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us mitzvahs litzaref bahen es Yisrael. A mitzvah changes you, but not every mitzvah changes you in the same way. Putting on tzitzis, right? And it's a cold day. How much effort is involved? Nothing. Okay? Not a lot. If a person grows up in a religious home, and in his family, Shabbos was part of life. Being a Shem Shabbos, you may get schar for Shabbos. There's no effort. It's a societal thing. On the other hand, someone who grew up in a non-religious home, or someone who reached a place where whatever it is that interests you, you're busy with the whole Shabbos, and you put that away. I want to tell you something. If a bacher who is hooked on this thing that they hold in his hand, and he decides for one Shabbos, I am not going to touch it. I promise you, he gets more schar than a person who has been frum his whole life and always kept Shabbos. Because the effort, the litzaref es abriyas, how much change it is making in him is way beyond someone who keeps Shabbos, because that's what you do. Now you have to keep Shabbos anyway, whether it's easy or whether it's hard. But in terms of the schar, let's say you have someone whose parnasa is that he is, I don't know what they call him today, a gossip columnist online. He gets paid for how much Lashon Hara he manages to spew, okay? Now you have another guy who is socially awkward, selective mutism, doesn't like to talk to people. Now they both decide that they're not going to talk Lashon Hara. No comparison. This guy's giving up his life. He's giving up his, whoever he is, whatever he does, how he does things. Forget about the schar. He's a changed individual. The other person, okay, he doesn't talk that much anyway. How much effort is involved in not speaking Lashon Hara? Very little. And this goes by mitzvahs, and it goes by averis. And as the expression that we said before, no pain, no gain. But when there is pain, there's a lot of gain. And that's why our generation, where the distance and the essence of life is so far from Torah, when a person makes that journey, it's light years away. And the exercise of his entire body and personality is so powerful that it changes him. It's the zdainos nases loy kazachyos. And this is something, as I said, that the Rosh Yeshiva Shlita figured out 50 years ago. And it's what makes it that you could have baalei tshuva yeshiva today in every single village or programs, where 100 years ago, there's no such thing. Because the distance is so far, and you get someone who is interested, it's tshuva me'ava, it's zdainos nasa like kazachyos. He's a changed person, and his whole past is now something that is strengthening him and giving him more power. Meir Simcha, Ohr Somayach, at the end of Parshas Kisavai, says a fascinating thing. We say, this piece he doesn't say, but it says it's elsewhere, on Yom Kippur, Lifnei miatem mitarim, the last Mishnah, in Masechta Yuma, umi mitar eschem. In front of whom are you purifying yourself, and who is purifying you? What's the dual expression? You start. Lifnei mi atem mitarim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take you further. That's a promise. And this, the Ohr Somayach says at the end of Parshas Kisavai, is the meaning of the words that we will say in the Haftarah when we daven Mincha. Dirshu Hashem b'imotzai. If you are looking for God really b'imotzai, especially now, it's not only during Aseret Yimei Teshuva, but any time you are looking for Him. Kra'u b'yaisei karayv. He's close to you. You love Him. Not coming from fear. Then Yazav Rasha Darkai. This is not an injunction, he says. This is a promise. I will guarantee you that you will be able to leave your whole way of life. V'ish oven machshavosav, and somebody who does not good things, you're not even going to be thinking there. How do they say it? Your head is not going to even be there. V'yashuv el Hashem v'yirachameyu. This is the Haftarah that we're going to say now. God promises us, you come back, I will have Rahmanas on you, ve'el Elokeinu ki yarbe l'sloyach. And that's why those of us who are able to do tshuva, who have the seichel to do tshuva me'ava, it goes so quickly. And they're able to reach heights that people who grew up observant can't. It's a promise from Hashem. He will help us, ve'el Elokeinu ki yarbe l'sloyach.